Welcome back to another Young Adults Bible study. Today, we're going to look at chapters 8 and 9. Chapter 8 of Revelation picks up where chapter 6, verse 17 left off with the end of the sixth seal. So the sixth seal was broken, and then there's an interlude of chapter 7. This interlude gives hope about those who are sealed and about the power of the one who's on the throne. The first part of chapter 8 draws our attention back to the seals, and we see the seventh seal being opened. There is silence in heaven for about a half hour, and we also see the arrival of 7 angels that hold 7 trumpets. This silence in heaven is significant. Firstly, it represents a silence in which the prayers of the saints can be heard. This is also the silence that happens before judgment. It's the silence of judgment. We see that concept in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 20, as well as Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 7. Now, as the seals come to an end, and before the trumpets start, we have a theophany in this text. Notice the rumblings of thunder, the earthquake. It very much reflects what we see in Revelation chapters 4, verse 5, as well as Exodus chapter 19 at Mount Sinai, when God is on the mountain, and there's the cloud, and there's the lightning, and the thunder, and the earthquake. God is present. So in the midst of all the judgment, in the midst of all the hardship, God is present in it. God is there. God is part of it. God oversees it and remains on the throne. That's very important. The key theme of Revelation is to be overcomers because God is on the throne. And so this allows us to see that God is still on the throne. So in chapter 8, verse 6, the trumpets begin to be sounded, and they continue to be sounded until the end of chapter 9. Then there's another interlude in between the 6th and 7th trumpet, just like we had between the 6th and 7th seal. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on these trumpet judgments because honestly, they're kind of the same thematic structure, writing style, and even events as we already saw with the seals being broken, and as we've already seen in the Old Testament, and as we are going to see again in the bowls later on, the bowls of God's wrath. And so I'm not going to spend a ton of time dissecting each judgment. What I want to draw our attention to as readers and good interpreters is the pattern, the theme and the style of the writing. At our Bible study, I handed out this piece of paper to everybody, and it kind of parallels, it shows the parallels between the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls, and the events in Exodus. You'll notice that the magnitude and intensity of the judgments from the seals to the trumpets has increased from 1/4 to 1/3. And we see it again with the bowls. It's the whole earth. And so we see an increase in intensity, but the events are still the same. Water turning to blood, livestock being destroyed, all sorts of things like that. Plague, famine, murder, death, just brutal judgments. All of creation and the universe rising up against the sinfulness of humanity. We will also see at the end of every one of these judgments a theophany. At the 7th seal, the 7th trumpet, the 7th bowl, all of them are accompanied by a theophany, a reminder that God is on the throne. I think we do the book of Revelation a great disservice when we view these events as an escalating series of historical events. Rather, I think we need to see this in more of a multiple perspectives of the same event, or possibly even John using repetition in order to emphasize specific points. In the discussion we had at Young Adults, they asked about these various perspectives and these literary styles, and I suggested that perhaps what John was doing was writing with different emphasis for each of the churches. You may remember when I talked about the 7 churches that were being written to, chapters 2 and 3, and if you don't recall this, go back and watch that video. I know it's not as well edited, but just watch it. In that video, I break the 7 churches into 3 parts. The 2 churches that are succeeding, the 2 churches that are about to lose their standing as churches, and the 3 churches that are kind of in the middle, not really succeeding, but not really failing, but all of them have their own set of struggles. So there's these 3 groups of churches. And we also see in Revelation 3 sets of judgments that are explained. The seals, the trumpets, and the bowls. Now the thunders I also suggest are one of those judgments, but they're sealed. We don't see that message. So those 3 groups, is it possible that John was writing the following message, these judgments, emphasizing it in certain ways and wording it in certain ways to apply more specifically to each of those sets of churches? Perhaps the quarter of the earth being destroyed, and the saints asking, how long, O Lord, is the message to the faithful churches, the healthy churches, perhaps. Perhaps a third of the earth being destroyed through judgment is what the mediocre, the middle churches see. They perceive that. Everything's falling apart, but it's only a third and there's still hope. And maybe the dying churches are the ones that see the whole earth being destroyed. All those without the mark of God, they see that, they perceive it, they see the harshness of it. How much more extreme is losing their standing, their lampstand as a church, when the penalty is that it will all be destroyed. So perhaps John is writing to his audience, and these three judgments, sets of judgments, seals, trumpets, and bowls, are not unique events, each one, so culminating in a total of 6 judgments per set, and then the 7th one's a theophany, so 6 and 3 is 18 judgments over the course of our history, and that we're able to somehow track that and determine when the last judgment happens, well, now God's going to arrive. What if this is all the same event? What if this is all God's judgment? And what if it's already been fulfilled in Exodus, in the Old Testament? And what if these simply point to the fact that the world is full of sin, and that the judgment of sin is severe, and that if we do not have the mark of God, there is no hope of salvation, because the whole earth will be destroyed. See that when we get to the bowls. Anyways, that's chapters 8 and 9. Thanks for sticking around and taking part with us as we've been going through the book of Revelation. Hope you're enjoying the series. Join in next time for chapter 10.